Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by the fantastic Nicole Beharie, who's currently starring in the movie Miss Juneteenth. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about first was, I know that Channing wrote this about her specific town in Fort Worth down in Texas, and so there were a lot of specifics that she really worked into the script and the detailing of this character and what that community was with you. And you went down there to spend some time before you started filming. And so I was really curious about what were kind of the specific details that you really culled from the time that you spent there before shooting that you were then able to transcend into your performance of Turquoise.
Wow, somebody did a lot of research. I was like, that's normally the part I tell you. Okay. Yeah, it was really valuable. Again, I've actually lived in the South. I have a lot of family in Georgia and South Carolina and Florida. I was born in Florida. So I read the script and I kind of brought to it my estimation and like my vision of who Turquoise was. And then Channing let me know that like, this is very specific to this part of not just all of Texas, this part of Texas, Fort Worth, of her particular community. So when I got there, I sort of had like a general idea of the dialect and, I told her, I was like, well, then let's really do this. Like, let me try my best to get as proximate to it as I could. So I hung out with two women. We just, did like childcare, hung out with the kids, went to some of the dance. My character's daughter wants to be a dancer, wants to do some dance. And we actually went to some of like the drill team practices and just sort of hung out in the bar. And I learned how to like barkeep and learn some of the like local dances. It was really just about inundating myself with like as much of the energy and the like essence and the spirit of the place, and then trying to get close to it without being a caricature, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that community just like took me in, and people were not shy because a lot of the smaller parts were played by local actors, right? So people had no issue with saying, no, that's not how you say that. Or why is she walking like that? I'm like, oh, does it seem okay? All right, let me try to melt in more. And I really feel like taking that time to spend time in the community made a big difference. Because it's, as you can see, it's not like she's not me. Even when I watch it, I'm like, oh, that's somebody else. Yeah.
When you were working on the dialect, what did you find were the specifics of the sounds and kind of, often it tends to come out through like the vowels that were really specific to that town beyond just kind of a general Southern Texan accent?
Yeah, well, it's funny because Kendrick Sampson, who plays Ronnie, who plays Turquoise's husband, strange lover, deadbeat dad kind of thing, he is actually from Texas, but is from Houston. So he had his own take on it, and he was like, it's a slight difference. It's a little more nasal. Also, I realized that just watching people, of course, when I was listening at home in New York, I was like, oh, I feel like I got it. When you watch people, like people don't really move their jaw, right? So Turquoise talk like this. I talk like, oh, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Like I move my face. She kind of spoke. A lot of people will say like the most interesting silver-tongued statements with like a complete deadpan, jaw not moving. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like that's a very different kind of Southern than sort of the polite Georgia Southern, a little singier. It was more nasal and just like restrained, if that makes sense. Is that too specific? Yeah.
No, that's so beautifully specific. And I love the way that you were just mentioning being able to like deliver certain kind of like vitriolic sentiments without ever moving your face. Because one of the things that was so captivating was that very first scene where she comes to pick up her daughter and her daughter's with a guy at school and there's no dialogue. And there's literally a few seconds on screen in which you just give a silent look outside of the car. And then you give a look when she gets into the car and it tells us everything about who she is as a mom, the love she has for her daughter, the type of like discipline and values that she instills in her as a mother. And so I wanted to ask about how you really thought about little moments like that and like the nuances where there's no dialogue, but you managed to bring so much into those quiet moments between them.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. that's just my, that's my mom and my aunts and my sister. Like that's me being an aunt. You just know when you love somebody and you don't have the energy to scream and it's inappropriate. Like it's I don't even know that I have any kind of craft that I could say is a part of that. Nothing other than just like human empathy and seeing people do that all my life, seeing people try to keep us all out of trouble or, guide us one way or the other with as much strength and love as they possibly can. So yeah, that's all I got for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a character as well, Turquoise really strikes me as someone who has so much kind of care and tenderness in the way that she carries other people's emotions, particularly when you look at the interactions with Bacon. It's like the sensitivity around that, the thought and care and love that she clearly has for him, even though it's different to what he feels. And we see that in so many different moments with all of her relationships. And so I wanted to ask about the way that you really thought about that as a central piece of her character and use that to inform a lot of the choices that you made in interactions with characters in her life in different ways.
Well, one of the things I did find when I spent time with people in the community is it's a small community. So like, living in these like more transient places like Brooklyn and LA and everything, you might not see somebody again if you flip them off on the highway or if, or if you have a bad attitude or whatever. Here, you're probably going to see them. Everyone's going to hear about it, so relationships are so important and they go back. So even though Bacon, wanted something from her that she couldn't give him, she loves him in a particular kind of way. It's almost like cousin, you know what I mean? Like everyone is a kind of family member almost. And that kind of community breeds a certain type of resilient, but also really heartfelt person. You can even see, and there's this one, it's a tiny character. He is Ronnie's best friend who like holds him back in the fight. It's a very tiny character, but the way he comes and he's like, Turk, I'm sorry, man, I'm sorry. And you just feel all this history. I'm like, this one little moment, like all this history that he knows he should have stopped him from doing this. And this guy's on screen for like 2 seconds twice, But I'm like, that is actually what it feels like being down there. And that's what it feels like, trying to represent these communities and also like the kind of community that I come from, so it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this piece, because I feel like we often see depictions of suffering and, loss. And of course, like being under the white gaze, like it's like Black characters in relationship to hardship, to oppression, to all those things. And this was a lot about just like social standing, community, how community functions, how you function in it, how you move within that, and what you like want for your future, whether it's yours or your child, I kind of went off on a tangent, but yeah.
Well, to that point, and thinking about that history within community, and even just Ronnie's friend that you were just mentioning, where it's one line and there's all that history. I know that a lot of the cast were people from the community and non-actors that you were working with on this project, and I imagine that probably meant there was less conversation about backstory, and that the types of discussions that you were having about what you wanted to find in a scene were very different to the way that you probably work on other projects. And so I was curious about how that really shifted the way that you worked to more of kind of an instinctual and like reactionary space in working with them in scenes together, but like still bringing that deep level of history.
Now, don't think for a second that people that are locals don't take it seriously now.
Yeah.
They would talk to me about like, I've lived here, I've worked here for this long, this is how this is run. I felt like it was an opportunity to sort of school me. Like, I was getting an education from them about who they were and what the world was. And I just had to basically, I don't know, it's almost like trying to be a spy, or like, I just wanted to be able to exist under the radar. Like there's a scene where she's walking through the bar, and I wasn't sure that I wouldn't stand out, right? When I'm reading it, I'm like, she's walking through the bar, everyone's walking around, and everyone is so authentic. They actually hang out here. Some of the people are there as we're lighting, like as we show up, they're there. It wasn't like they placed people. And I think for me, it was just about respecting you know, who they are, and trying to be like, okay, I'm going to actually serve them. When we had those evening scenes in the bar, I actually did do all the work. Like I served everybody. You know, some of it we were just rolling as I'm collecting coins and cleaning and opening the beers on the thing and getting chicken wings and barbecue and all that. I actually had to do those things. So after a while, it's just like you're just moving through it. It was nice to be in the world in that way, actually. And I just didn't want to stand out, if that makes sense. Like, you know, any false notes, I think you would pop out of it.
I also wanted to dive into talking a little bit about the pageant itself with Miss Juneteenth, because there's that really beautiful scene where she's with her daughter, and her daughter is essentially saying, you know, this didn't bring you what you expected and the life that you thought you would have. So why does this mean so much to you still? And, you know, we really learned that like it was still this incredibly empowering experience in her life. And there's a reason that she still kind of holds on to it in the way that she does. And, you know, taking the detail of that scene and learning what it really meant to her and the empowerment that it gave her. How did that feed into the way that you were playing a lot of other scenes, just knowing that moment was coming and that's what she's been kind of holding internally with this for herself?
Again, it's a Texas thing, but it's not only a Texas thing. I think it's universal. There's the big beauty queen culture, right? But then outside of that, there's like just human nature of like holding on to your heyday, to your moment. You know, I got an uncle that's like, man, when I used to play this and that. And, you know, I have things that I kind of go back to constantly. And I'm like, are you talking about that again? Like the way that we structure our identities is like so interesting to me. I mean, it's kind of what we do, right? As actors, like how did this person decide that this is who they are, other than all the other things that tell you who you are? And I think she held on to that one moment, like you so beautifully said, that made her feel like she could do something, like she was somebody, you know, like she was beautiful, and that she had all this promise, despite the other roads that she had to take in her life. And yeah, I think that also, you're right, it does inform, although I'm wearing like tattered shorts, and Turquoise is wearing tattered shorts, and didn't have time to do her hair because she's so busy. There is a kind of a poise about her, you know. There is a kind of a awareness of social decorum and all that kind of stuff that like she never lets go of. She knows how to turn it off, but she never fully lets go of it. You always kind of feel that in her. And that's something that Channing talked about. And you really see it in the community. You really see like there are people that have they're so regal, you know what I mean? And I think I heard this quote, I feel like I'm going to be saying it wrong, but it's something like, even if you're like, you know, a sanitation worker or whatever, if you do it with your whole heart and like with all of your honor, then like life is worth it. You know what I mean? And it's like, I feel like that's what I was seeing. And that's what I wanted to embody, that like, we have such values that like, if you're not a millionaire, and if the world doesn't really see your value, especially being a woman and like a single mother, a young single mother, that you are nothing, basically. And this whole film is kind of pushing up against that. Not even just her, but the whole community. You know, the whole community could be a group of people, or our people, that we very often see tender depictions of, you know.
Yeah. And to that point of her being a single mom, I was interested in the way in which you and Alexis Chikazi worked together on building that dynamic, because there is something that's very specific, even beyond just the fact that she's her mom, the fact that she's been the primary caregiver, even though her dad is still around and in the picture, that like there's an intimacy and a different type of bond that exists between the two of them because of that.
Yeah, I love that girl, Alexis. Alexis Chikazi. She's an angel. She this was her first movie, period. We had someone else that was supposed to come and do the part, and that didn't work out. And she came in literally, I was already in Texas, like prepping, and she came in, and she was one of a few people who read. And she just had like a thing, and was so vulnerable, but like strong, and like a little bit rebellious. I just felt like what happened between us was nothing more. Again, it's so simple. It's nothing more than, of course I have my like personal work, but nothing more than a slightly older actress wanting the younger one to do well. And me just like protecting her and, you know, loosening her up and wanting her to have a great experience, which is what her mother wanted for her, you know? So it kind of worked.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful that there is that opportunity to explore these three generations of women through this story. And did you find yourself looking at the performances that the two of them were giving as your mother and as your daughter, and even just looking at some of the detailing and the mannerisms that they would bring to their performance and thinking about what would have passed down between each of these three women that would be the common traits that they would each have personality-wise, but also in terms of like physical movement?
Yeah, I mean, Turquoise wanted to basically stop so much of the patterns that you're talking about and like personality traits that were coming from her mother. It's almost like she wanted to do the down, to cut it off, you know, cut off anything that would be rebellious or sensual but actually, I think by the end of it, she realizes that like those things are strengths if you own them in a particular way. Like her daughter actually taught her that, which is gorgeous. And I also wanted to say, as far as Kai or Alexis' character is concerned, I really related, like, of course I'm older, but I really related to her character more than anyone. You know, I'm like sort of one of the artists in my family and sort of thinking outside of the box. So I wanted to be a part of a piece that also showed like a young woman coming into her own in a particular way, you know, despite her mother's very traditional religious take on things. And I don't even think that like Turquoise fully understood how rigid she was becoming, that it's almost like a mirror of her mother, but just like a different version of it, you know? So it's like she tried to break free, that didn't work. Now her daughter's trying to break free, she doesn't see it. And finally the generational restriction lifts, you know? So it actually works out, but yeah.
Yeah. And there's such a complexity with Turquoise's relationship with her mother. You know, we see moments where there is a bit more tenderness and closeness. And then we see, obviously, you know, that church scene where she goes in and her mother is, you know, thinking that everything that she's doing with her life is something that needs to be fixed and needs to be solved. And you capture so much of that complexity. And we really get flickers of what that history was like, what that childhood was like, you know, through tiny details, such as when she mentions that she's been working since she was 15. So we understand a lot of responsibility that she had to take on in childhood. And just, I was interested in how you really constructed the bigger picture of that relationship in a way that you were able to capture it in such small moments in the film.
I don't know. You're so good. You like really watch these movies. I don't know. There's a bunch of pages and writing and journal entries. There's like, there's a lot of story building that I don't even share with the other actors sometimes, you know? It's so complicated, parental relationships, you know, we love them, we are them. You know, it's just like, there's like so much there. I don't even, all I can say there is, again, I got to work with a tremendous actress who was local. And for me, it was just a lot of writing about like what Turquoise's life was like, you know, and then imagining, again, it's like the thing that drew me to the piece, like imagining everybody. It happens to women too, as we age, right? Everyone's like, oh, you're so amazing at a certain point. And then after a while you get less looks and less, is it about your beauty, your intelligence? Oh, it's too much, you're too. And so like just seeing Turquoise try to navigate her worthiness through her daughter and realizing mom was doing the same thing. Like she's trying to use her daughter to get social standing or to, you know, be somebody in the church. It's actually the same thing in a different way. And then not realizing like you can do it on your own. It's one of my favorite, and the reason why I wanted to do the piece is like by the end, she says a line that it's basically like, I want something for myself, you know? And in most I feel like most Hollywood films, romance, comedy, drama, whatever, the happily ever after is you get the guy, right? Like you get the knight in shining armor, you get the guy. And this is a different tale. And her mother's been telling her forever, like, just get a guy, you know?
Yeah.
So it kind of, both of them, Kai and Turquoise, come into their own there. And it kind of changes the trajectory of their lives, hopefully.
Yeah, it's so beautiful watching her go on that journey to the point where she kind of realizes that what she wants is just to have something for herself. And that is what her goal is after a life of defining success in a very different way for herself. And how did you kind of like make choices throughout the film and throughout the scenes that you were doing to kind of take her on that journey so that it really kind of lands with such poignancy once she gets to that moment where it's like, oh, this is actually what I want. And this is what all of this has been leading up to for me.
I think I really tried to ask the questions that she's asking herself. You know, one thing I did notice, I'm not a parent, but parents do, a lot of them are constantly checking in and having moments, even though they're silent moments of like, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Am I doing this right? Like, I feel like that's what I should be doing, but did I do it right? Or then something happens and like, oh no, I did it wrong. So I feel like there's a constant checking in with herself, a constant, you know, wanting someone to help, and then finally realizing I just have to trust myself. I have to trust my choices. However I do this, I'm the one doing it, and like taking full responsibility for it was number one. And then number two, you know, not to be too personal, but I think this piece gave me an opportunity to also ask myself a lot of questions while I was in her, you know, about community and about what I'm waiting for, you know, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, am I waiting for something to happen? You know, like, what do you want? So really sort of having to ask those questions inside the character, you can't help but start to have it resonate with yourself. And so I think maybe that's what you are referring to.
Yeah. I love the scene so much where she's watching her daughter perform Maya Angelou's Phenomenal Woman. And, you know, she's been trying to instill a certain version of that performance in her daughter, and her daughter makes her own choices in that minute. And I just thought from your performance that there were so many different choices that you could have made in how she responds to that. And you capture kind of like this internal journey that she's going on when it's like, oh, wait, what's happening? This isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then just like the proudness that she starts to feel in seeing her daughter, you know, perform in this way. And so I wanted to ask you about the journey of filming that scene and figuring out what all the emotional layering was going to be of everything that she's processing in that really brief moment, because you don't even have any lines. We just pan over to you for those instances and capture all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. How do you explain face acting?
Valid question.
I have mercy. I just have the thoughts. I don't know. I love the girl. I don't know. How do I talk about this? I mean, here's the thing. My heart was like so ripped open because I was there watching all these local, beautiful, in so many different ways, young women, right, do their thing on this stage. And then, you know, you have Nicole, like the actress, and you have Turquoise, and she's seeing the same thing, but then also seeing this girl coming into her own, and I'm seeing this girl coming into her own, you know, learning something brand new and doing a really fabulous job at it. So I think that may be a part of it, but I also feel like, I don't know. It's hard for me to, I don't know. I fail at this one. I can't explain the face. I'm just having all the thoughts. I just felt so connected with, I think, what Channing created in that community, seeing all those young women. And then also, you know, Turquoise kind of wishes that she was up there and wishes that she had her voice in a particular kind of way. So despite, it's like, you know, when you have that like gnawing, annoying person in a meeting that's always speaking up and you're like, can we just, you know, move on? You might be that person. She's like, what do you mean? Like, I don't know. But you're like, always speaking up. But then there's also a little bit of envy, like, wow, they're really owning it. You know, I feel like that's kind of what happens is she's like, you're breaking out of the lines. You're coloring outside of the lines. but wow, like that's really beautiful. You know, like I don't want you to do that, but it's working. And I wish I could do that. Yeah. And I would hope that that's what parents want for their kids, like for real, you know, to defy the expectations. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and even just the way that you're talking about filming that scene, there's so many kind of like subtle, nuanced moments throughout this whole film. And I was interested in kind of overall, what do you feel are the skills and the elements of your craft that this character asked of you that other roles and other projects haven't asked of you previously?
That's interesting. I feel like, I think the big difference is Channing would let me just linger a little bit. People generally want to see like, give me something like the bang, the like, there's like some, this, in this movie, like there's no big bang moment, you know, it's kind of slice of life. You're seeing people exist and just navigate life without, like I said, some huge trauma or just some huge thing that happens. Little pains, slightly larger pains, a little bit of victory. And I think one of the things that made me gravitate towards it was that there are a lot of scenes where you have to sort of like, I don't know, showboat or like have all of this, like all this energy. I'm always interested when someone's giving a speech, I kind of like glance over the crowd and I like to see what the other people are doing and thinking. And I feel like that's this, like the people that you ignore that are in the room that people aren't zooming in on, they zoomed in on the person that you would ignore a little bit. And so she really got to just exist in her thoughts and just kind of go about her day to day and be in a way that felt very close. I think that's something I haven't really experienced. It's always kind of like, go like more of this, more of that, you know, as opposed to just watch it and let your heart do its thing and, you know, love your daughter. And then all this stuff happens without somebody being like, now right here, you cry, right here, we're going to scream, we're going to kick them there. It was like a lot, it was way fluid. And I think that that's a nice thing with dealing also with such an intuitive female director. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's such a stunning performance to watch, and congratulations on everything with the film.
You.
And thank you so much.